Welcome, everyone, to another great video. Today's story begins with a man named Fernando. Fernando had just lit a cigarette when a car suddenly sped past and splashed water all over him, dousing the cigarette. Fernando watched as the cigarette got swept along the roadside, carried by the flowing rainwater toward a storm drain. Curious, he followed the water's path down to the drain and looked inside. Across the road, he noticed a well-known local bank. He thought for a moment, then followed the flow of water all the way to the end of the drain and looked down the drainpipe. Suddenly, an idea struck him, connecting the drain to the bank. He immediately called a friend, and that night, taking advantage of the quiet streets, the two of them lowered a tape measure down into the drain and traced it all the way to where they believed the vault might be. Before long, Fernando found that the spot was only about 18 meters from the bank's main entrance. All they needed to do now was dig a tunnel straight from there to the bank's vault. The two of them went home and started refining the plan. But before they could dig anything, they needed to know the exact distance from the drain to the bank, and they couldn't just walk around measuring the street with a ruler without drawing suspicion. After thinking it over, Fernando told his friend, Diaz, to mark the 28th spoke on a bicycle wheel. Then they simply walked the bike down the street as if going about their day, counting the wheel's rotations from the manhole cover all the way to the front of the bank. That gave them the distance with reasonable accuracy, without anyone noticing. Now Fernando just had a simple calculation left. From the manhole cover to the bank's door, the distance came out to 6.5 meters. Using the Pythagorean theorem, he worked out the exact length and angle the tunnel would need to follow. Even with the numbers in hand, they weren't ready to start digging yet. First, Fernando needed to scout the layout of the bank's vault. He walked in posing as a customer, pretending to have some business there, and secretly used a small camera to photograph the layout behind the vault door. He then strolled casually into the lobby and photographed the surveillance cameras and surrounding area as well. Once he felt no one was paying attention, he pulled out his camera again and started photographing the transaction counter, but this time, the security guards noticed his odd behavior. They pulled him aside for questioning and searched him thoroughly, but found nothing suspicious. Fernando had already transferred the photos off the camera and hidden the memory card. In fact, getting caught by security had been part of his plan all along. It let him get escorted through the basement, right past the vault, giving him a close-up look at its entire structure, all in the name of helping prevent future robberies. On his way through, he committed every detail of the underground vault to memory. Back home, he combined the photos with what he remembered to build a complete mental map of the vault. But the vault's surrounding walls were solid concrete, which meant his original plan wouldn't work. Looking over the map, the group decided to instead dig a tunnel toward the security room next to the vault, where the walls would be weaker. With the plan set, they got to work. The team hauled their tools into the drain and pried loose a marked aluminum panel to begin digging. Fortunately, the ground there was damp and the concrete softer than usual, which made tunneling somewhat easier. Still, back at home, Fernando kept turning over another problem in his head. Once inside the vault, how would they quickly get into the safes? Diaz suggested simply forcing the locks open with tools. It would only take about 2 minutes per safe. But with hundreds of safes inside the vault, opening each one by hand would take far too long and be exhausting. The rest of the group rejected the idea outright. Then Bosch suggested they take advantage of the bank's weekend closure to give themselves more time. But Fernando felt that the longer they stayed inside the bank, the greater their risk of getting caught, so finding a fast way to crack the safes became the top priority. Fernando proposed they first study the actual lock mechanism the bank used. He asked Mario to pose as a wealthy client and rent a safe deposit box at a branch of the same bank within 100 kilometers, just to examine the lock up close. Once they understood the mechanism fully, they'd be able to open the real safes far more quickly. Sebastian then built a special device specifically designed to crack that type of lock, and the team celebrated the breakthrough. But while that problem was solved, the tunneling crew hit a wall of their own. They didn't have proper digging equipment and were struggling to follow the mapped-out path. Mario suggested buying a water level to help keep the tunnel straight, but Fernando immediately refused. He'd already spent the last of the money he'd secretly saved from his wife, and there was nothing left. With no easy solution in sight, the team was stuck. Then Sebastian had an idea. He set up a tripod fitted with a laser, effectively building a free, makeshift water level. This sped up their digging significantly. After 3 grueling days and 2 sleepless nights, the tunnel got to within less than 8 meters of the bank's vault. That's when Mario remembered something critical. While they now had a machine to crack open the safes, nobody had figured out how to get through the vault's massive iron door itself. Hearing this, Fernando was devastated. Exhausted, he sat down on the balcony and broke down in tears. His wife tried to comfort him, and in that moment, an idea suddenly came to him. Fernando rushed to find Mario and laid out the new plan. They couldn't force open the iron door, but they didn't need to. All they had to do was time their entry for when the bank was open and staffed, because during business hours, the vault door would already be unlocked. That solved the iron door problem entirely. Now the plan was simple. Some of them would stage a fake robbery at the bank's main lobby to draw the security guard's attention there, while the rest slipped through the tunnel straight into the now accessible vault. Mario and Fernando nodded in agreement. Mario and Diaz put on gloves, pulled on black hats, grabbed toy water guns, and ran straight for the bank. Within a minute, they had the entire lobby under their control. One of the robbers deliberately let a person in the surveillance room notice him, prompting the alarmed security guard to reach for the phone to call the police. Rather than panicking, the robber calmly asked for the guard's gun, calmly removed its magazine, and then handed it right back to him. By then, police were already gathering outside the bank, but the robbers stayed composed. They shut the back entrance, then opened the front door and pushed the security guard outside, confusing the police even further. But the moment the bank's main door swung shut again, one of history's most audacious bank robberies truly began. Inside, the first robbers took control of the staff on both ground floor levels, while the rest of the crew, hidden down in the basement, gently pushed a safe aside, revealing a hole in the wall behind it. This was the very tunnel Fernando and his companions had dreamed about, the one that would change their lives in a single night. Their dream was finally becoming real. Outside, a crowd had gathered, media crews, curious onlookers, and an elite police negotiation unit led by Commander Miguel Ángel, a skilled negotiator. After learning from the security guard that the robbers had taken his phone, Miguel called it directly and began preparing psychological tactics for the negotiation. But before he could even get a word in, one of the robbers cut him off. As it turned out, the robbers had studied Miguel's entire negotiation history over the past week, preparing meticulously to counter him. Mario had even spent his own savings on acting classes, practicing his performance in front of a mirror before the heist even began, also he could convincingly stall the negotiator while the rest of the team looted the vault. His job was to waste as much of the police's time as possible. Meanwhile, Fernando and his crew quickly retrieved their equipment and got straight to work. Every second now mattered enormously. Using the safe-cracking machine they'd built, Fernando opened the first safe, empty. Undeterred, he moved to the next one, which was stuffed with cash, yet he barely reacted, already moving on to the third. Inside that one was a bag of white powder. Fernando quickly put everything back and moved on, working through the hundreds of safes methodically. Outside, the police were still holding back, taking no major action. They assumed this was just a group of amateur robbers who hadn't planned things properly, so they leaned toward negotiation instead. Miguel kept urging the robbers to surrender and confess, warning them the bank was completely surrounded. He even quietly ordered a small team of officers to climb onto the bank's roof. But he underestimated the crew. Moments later, one of the robbers heard the noise and confronted Miguel over the radio, furious, threatening that if the police didn't withdraw from the roof within 1 minute, there would be consequences. Miguel had no choice but to pull his team back. As soon as the officers retreated, the robber made a new demand. he wanted the commanding officer himself to come inside and speak with him face to face for the hostages' safety. Miguel had no choice but to comply. The robbers made him wait nearly an hour before Miguel finally arrived, a deliberate stalling tactic to buy the rest of the crew more time. Once connected, the robber launched into a loud tirade, and once he'd said his piece, made yet another demand, insisting a lawyer be brought in within half an hour, and even giving Miguel a name and number. But Miguel already knew that lawyer wasn't real, and the police called in an actual lawyer instead. Inside, Mario took off his black hat and settled into the bank manager's chair to handle the call with the lawyer and police, once again buying his team the time they needed. The police and the commanding officer, none the wiser, believed everything the lawyer told them. Meanwhile, the safe cracking continued steadily. Then, in the lobby, one of the hostages suddenly raised his hand, interrupting the ongoing robbery. He explained he had an urgent need, using the bathroom, gesturing toward a potted plant nearby. A robber stood watch close by, making the man visibly nervous. Even the robber had to tell his partner to stop staring at the man so intensely. Within a minute, the man had settled back down, only to raise his hand again shortly after, asking a second time to use the bathroom. This time, the robber let him go, but shook his gun in front of him as a warning, freezing the man in fear. He clearly hadn't expected the robber to react that way. Suddenly the robber threw open the bank's main door and pushed the terrified man outside. Miguel rushed over and started questioning him, but the man was too frightened to speak, his fear had visibly overwhelmed him. Miguel was baffled by what had just happened. In reality, it had all been a calculated move to distract the police while the rest of the crew stayed focused underground. Around this time, a sniper posted outside spotted something he could barely believe. One of the robbers inside was carefully lighting candles on a birthday cake. Half an hour earlier, that same robber had overheard an elderly hostage, around 80 years old, mention it was her birthday, so the crew decided to celebrate it with her right there inside the bank. One of the robbers even asked a hostage to help sing "Happy Birthday" to her, before politely escorting the woman safely out of the bank afterward. Watching all this unfold, even the seasoned commanding officer was thoroughly confused about what to make of these robbers. Nothing about their behavior matched a typical heist, yet he had nothing concrete to hold against them. Meanwhile, back inside, Fernando ran into a new problem. The safe cracking machine, having run continuously for hours, had overheated and stopped cooling down properly. It was now unusable, and there was nothing left to do but wait. Just then, every robber's alarm went off in unison. It was time to leave. According to plan, they had to abandon the operation now, even though quite a few safes remained unopened, a bittersweet moment, but Fernando didn't linger on it. Without wasting a second, he gave the order to withdraw as planned. The robber upstairs pulled his gun and calmly told the hostages to stay exactly where they were. Below, the crew packed up their loot bags and began moving them into the tunnel. 3 of the robbers quickly climbed in, passing the money bags down to their companion waiting below, who loaded them into a small cart. 2 remaining members stayed behind to thoroughly clean the scene, wiping away every trace of their presence before pulling the safe cabinet back into place at the tunnel's entrance and slipping away themselves. Outside, the police were still on edge and fully mobilized. The commanding officer had even dispatched a special team to watch the drain outlet near the bank, anticipating an escape through the sewers. Eventually, it looked as if the robbers had simply vanished from inside the bank. The moment the coast seemed clear, police rushed in, only to find the remaining hostages sitting quietly on the floor, having no idea where the robbers had gone. The experienced commanding officer inspected the bank thoroughly and eventually noticed disturbed ground and telltale signs beneath a cabinet. He ordered it pushed aside, revealing the tunnel hole in the wall behind it. Miguel felt confident they'd finally catch the robbers, since he'd already stationed a special team at the drain outlet. What he didn't know was that Fernando had no intention of going that way. Instead of heading toward the drain exit the police were watching, Fernando led his companions deeper into the tunnel system, moving against the expected direction entirely. Before long, they emerged at a different, lower section of the drain, where the rest of the crew had been waiting with a getaway car. Fernando quickly climbed in, and the team went to work removing a manhole cover from beneath the vehicle to complete their escape route. Everyone waited as the last man hauled up the final bags of loot. Using some simple rigging, they quickly loaded everything into the car, then sealed the manhole cover back exactly as it had been. And just like that, the bank robbery was complete. Fernando and his companions had pulled off a heist almost too audacious to believe. Not only had they made off with crores of rupees from the bank, but they'd built an entire undetected escape route that no one ever discovered. The real question left hanging, though, was whether their success would actually last, and that question is what carries the rest of the story forward.